clunky to start up. Okay, now we're live.
Okay, we are live. So thanks everyone for coming today and everyone who's streaming in on YouTube. I am Marion Schmidt and I'm a fourth-year PhD student, and I am here at the University of Michigan here in Ann Arbor. And I'm very excited to talk to you all today about R Markdown. I have found that R Markdown is extremely useful in my research, and I think that it can be really useful for other researchers. And so I'm glad that you all are on board with me to learn this awesome, fantastic tool with me today. Here at Michigan, we have two helpers, Akima George and Arthur Ensley, and so they're our people. And here in Michigan, we'll be using the sticky system. So many people have their green stickies on their computer already. That means I'm ready. I'm with you. I'm following along. And as soon as you're not with me, please put your pink sticky up and say, hey, Arthur, Akima, or helpers in other locations, come help me. And so hopefully everyone has been navigated over to our lesson. If you are not there yet, you can go to our lovely Etherpad. So these are class notes. Helpers and other people who are following along, please be welcome to use these class notes. And this can be a nice place for you to re-navigate yourself either to the lesson, to this Etherpad, or if you're on YouTube, to re-find the link. Okay, so is everyone here at the lesson page? Okay, so please navigate over to the lesson page. It's published on RPubs, and so you can just go to rpubs.com/marshme/rmarkdown. And at the very top, it looks like this. And as an extra sell for this tool, this entire lesson has been written in exactly what we're learning today, R Markdown. So this is a fantastic way to show you some of the capabilities of it. So here I've published it online just like a normal website. Over here on the left side, I have a table of contents. And so if you wanted to skip ahead down to the Markdown part of the lesson, or see why I can hopefully convince you to use this tool, you can do that over here on the left side. And this was constructed as a part of the data intensive biology program at UC Davis, run by Titus Brown. And so that was the main motivation. Oh.
Totally fine. Could you go back to the Etherpad, please?
Etherpad, yes.
Real quickly, I'm showing the top part of your Etherpad. So if you guys look up here, you can see the link to go to the Etherpad. Please get yourself there. The one. This is what you're right on time. And yes, just go to these links right here, where you guys can.
Yeah, I don't have to do those links. I just type in software.
Did you receive the workshop registration page in the email?
I got the installation directions.
Awesome. So in the, yeah, Arthur could help him. Okay. Do I have the remote classrooms with me? Are you guys on the lesson page?
Yep, we're with you.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to continue along. Okay, so if anyone's wondering how you can find this web page and see what it looks like, you can click here on the GitHub link. And so this is my GitHub page. And this workshop is actually this file. So RMarkdown lesson _.rmd. And so if we click on raw, we can see the raw file. And so this is everything that I typed to make this lesson. And you can see in some spots it looks pretty intuitive. And so we're going to be walking through what the top of this document looks like. This is called a YAML header. Something like this looks like a code chunk where I have set global options, and so on. This is what it looks like at its core. Okay, so just that link there. And R Markdown had a new version released very recently. This is the second version of R Markdown, and there's been a lot of brand new, hot off the press additions to it. So that's one reason why we needed to download R Studio, because R Studio has also been updated to help make it easier to use R Markdown. And so we'll be using some of those tools today. And so that's why the most updated version of R Studio is important for our workshop. I had some inspiration from the R Markdown website, and Yahuizai's book on dynamic documents with R and Knitr. It's also updated for the most recent version of R Markdown, so that was really awesome. Carl Broman, he created a website called Knitr in a Nutshell. This is a really fantastic resource for people to go back and use while they're learning R Markdown and for future reference. And there's awesome cheat sheets here that R Studio has produced, and we'll be referring to some of these today. Okay, so has anyone here at Michigan heard of literate programming? I see one hand. Great. Okay, so we're all going to learn what that means. So literate programming is the idea behind dynamic documents. And it was proposed in 1984 by Donald Knuth. And it was originally for mixing source code with like software development documentation together in one document. Today we're going to be using the idea of literate programming to produce some analysis code, for example, and some narrative description of what that analysis code means. And so we can produce some plots and then describe what that plot means, or what that plot is describing. So there's 3 steps of literate programming. And the first step is to parse the source document and separate the code from the narrative, so the written document. So what part is code, what part is just writing, and then execute the code, return the results, and then mix that in with the narrative written document into one. So for us as the writers or users of literate programming, we first have to write the analysis code, and then we have to write the narrative to explain the results of that code. So this really simulates the science, kind of doing science. So we do some analysis, and then we try to figure out what that means. And so we might write up a report for our collaborators or our advisors, and so on. And so I found that this especially mimics my process as a scientist. And so traditionally what people did, instead of doing the narratives, was they used comments. And so I have a little example right here. So you can see here there's a title, and then I have by me and the date, and then you just use these pound symbols to comment out the code. And when there is an absence of a pound symbol, kind of like here, what does the data look like? It runs some code. And so the reader has to parse out where the narrative, the writing is, and then where the functions are if they're looking at this document. So it's a little less readable. In addition, you would have to send this document to your collaborator, and then they'd have to run it to see the results. And so they'd have to run the code themselves. But what's really nice about literate programming is that it allows us to both write the code, run the code, and describe the code. And so if we were to do it in this sense, our output of the same previous code might look something like this. where I may format the title to be bold and then write my name in italics, start describing what the document looks like. So for example, here's a table. This table is interactive. I could make it bigger or smaller. I could sort the table. So this might be really useful for a collaborator. Send it, see what here, this is the MT cars data. So this is data that's just found within R already. It's in base R. And so you can see, for example, which car has the lowest miles per gallon, and that's a Cadillac Fleetwood. So this might be nice to send along to someone so they can just click through and see some of the code output. And then you can also, so here I was running a linear model to see if there's a relationship between the weight of a car and miles per gallon. And so there appears to be, and we can confirm that with a plot. And so one thing that's very recent to R Markdown are the idea of a widget. And so here, this is an interactive plot. And for example, I could go over the data points to see what the values are. So that might be another useful thing to do as a researcher. And then here at the bottom, I wrote, it appears that, and here there's this value 5.344. And so here I'm actually executing R code instead of reporting what the coefficient is. And so I can embed some code in the description that you wouldn't be able to in like a traditional code file. Also, it's really nice because if we use literate programming, we can tangle and weave, which are just fancy ways of saying that we can take all the code out of the document and then maybe apply it to some other type of data or use it in another way. Or we could weave the document where we execute the code just to get the results. Okay. Are there any questions about literate programming? No. Okay. We're good here at Michigan. So one nice kind of side effect, but not guaranteed, is the idea of reproducible research. So since we are encapsulating our analysis into one document where we have both code and narrative explaining the results, it can be a way to get closer to a more reproducible workflow. But it's not guaranteed. So some things that are not already done for us is that, and if we want to be more reproducible, is we should first encapsulate the full project into one directory. So when I showed you the GitHub page, all of the files and everything for this lesson was in one directory, one repository on my GitHub page. So that made me one step closer. And then you can release all your code and data. You can document everything. So R Markdown will kind of does this for us. And gets us closer to that. And we can make figures, tables, statistics, and scripts and inline code within that document. And then we should use relative paths. We should always set our seed and use a randomized seed. Don't just always use set seed of 1. And then we can use the session information at the end of the document. So if someone wanted to reproduce this lesson plan, for example, you could navigate over here to the left, number 10, session info, and then you could be informed of what versions of the packages and RStudio and R and Knitter that I use to put this lesson plan together. So this is one motivation to use R Markdown in your research, but it's not completely guaranteed, so these other steps also need to be taken to help get you closer to a more reproducible workflow.
Another question.
Yeah.
The question is, what's a seed?
A seed. So if you're doing any randomized So maybe you're going to randomize some numbers to run a statistical test, or there's any permutations where you have a randomized start to that statistical test. You can make it more reproducible by setting the seed. I don't know the like all that goes into it. Does anyone have anything to add? But it helps it, if I were to set the seed and then share with my collaborator would then have the same randomized start to whatever statistical test that is.
So I think the seed is like a random number generator.
Yeah, so random number generator. And so if you set it, it will always create the same random numbers when people execute your code. Okay, awesome. Thanks for that question. And please keep the questions coming. There's some, okay. So now we're gonna talk about Markdown. So R Markdown is based on Markdown. So first, we need to understand Markdown. And Markdown is a system for writing simple, readable text that is very easily converted to HTML. Some of you have maybe tried to learn HTML, and it looks kind of messy. So Markdown is a plain text formatting syntax, and it's a software tool that was written in Perl to make this conversion to HTML easier. So yes, make the document as readable as possible. So for example, here's a list in HTML code. So I'm a rock climber, and so I often think of what goes into my packing list for rock climbing. So I'll need my climbing shoes and harness and backpack. And having this body and section, like in HTML, you have to set up a lot of the background. But with Markdown, to get the same list effect, we can write this. And so we could use a pound sign to create a header, and then these asterisks would create a list of bulleted points. And so if you're human, Markdown is a much more simple syntax to understand, and you can pull out the main idea. So here we can see that we need a rope with the asterisks, but with the list in HTML, it's a little bit harder to pull out what the core of the list is. So it kind of does the job for us, and so we can use a more simple setup to it to make an HTML. We don't need to learn HTML to write HTML. And so Markdown was created in 2004 by John Gruber and Aaron Swartz. And they have done a fantastic job for us, so we don't need to learn HTML. So thank you to them. Okay, so R Markdown. So R Markdown, as I mentioned, is a variant of Markdown, and it makes it really easy to create these dynamic documents. And so we can make presentations and reports, and we can embed our code, and we can do so and make different types of documents. And so, for example, here the lesson that I've output is an HTML file, so we could all navigate to it in our web browsers. But you can also make tons of other documents. So I had also sent out the installation instructions in a PDF file. PDF documents could be a nice way. You can make LaTeX style files if you render a PDF. We can make Markdown files, even Microsoft Word. So if you're writing papers, you can output a Word document if your collaborators prefer to work in Word. You can also put together some nice presentations. There's the HTML5 presentations, and there's a few types of formats. You can also output PDF presentation slides. And so these would be a good way to make a presentation where you want to maybe show some code or actually execute some code within your presentation, rather than producing a plot in your code and then bringing it over to PowerPoint and playing with the size and whatnot. I find it harder to convince academics to use the presentations within R Markdown. PowerPoint is generally much more flexible, at least for now. And so I try to convince people and scientists and academics to use R Markdown with the PDF output, or as we're going to be focusing on today, the HTML. And especially the HTML output is super flexible. And there's a lot of other dependencies that we can use to make it look nice and be super flexible. What's that? Oh, sorry to those who can hear that remotely. Apparently we have loud heaters in this building. Okay. And we can even make entire websites. So if some of you have looked at, say, Knitter in a Nutshell, or actually the R Markdown. So here I have a bunch of links if you wanted to look into making these types of output. And so, for example, let's click on one. Okay, so this is the R Markdown version 2 documentation. And this was written with R Markdown. And so this is a website that is produced by this tool that we're learning today. Okay. So why R Markdown? Oh, there's another question.
So what happens to the dynamic graphs and tables when you export your R Markdown into PDFs and Word documents? Do they remain dynamic? Do they have like an external clicker, or do they that in?
Yeah, so if you make your output interactive, like I showed you at the beginning, it will no longer be interactive. So it will just be the typical table output, and it will not be an interactive plot. So for example, you would not be able to put your cursor over a data point and get what the raw data XY values are, but there would be the output of the plot. And it's really nice because if some of you are familiar with LaTeX, R Markdown can understand LaTeX. And so if you want to center things in the document or do other LaTeX-specific things, you can. I am not familiar with LaTeX, so we won't be covering that today. But it looks, as you have seen with the installation instructions, it looks really similar, but some of the formatting is just a little bit different than it would be in the HTML output. Okay. So R and RStudio are both open source, so that is a motivation to use these tools. Also, R Markdown can accept many different languages, so if you want to run some Unix or Bash code in a code chunk within R Markdown, you can, or if you want to run some Python, you can also do that. Today, we're only going to be working with R code. And there's two ways to execute code within an R Markdown document. The first way is to run inline code. And so, as I had mentioned earlier, that is when you're writing the narrative, and maybe in a sentence you might want to say that the p-value is blank. So this is really helpful for writing results sections. Or there might be times in your document where you want to run a bunch of code. So maybe you're transforming your data, or you want to make a plot or several plots. And so there will be a whole chunk of code that is several lines, or as many lines as you wish, code that you want to execute or show, or something like that. So there's inline code, and there are code chunks. And since it was based on Markdown, it makes it easy to embed images, use LaTeX equations. You can include tables and graphs. Since it's kind of a text-based file, you can also use version control. So you can use Git, and then it's even easier to share your documents with collaborators or people around the world. You can add external links, like I have many in this lesson. And I think that they're beautiful documents. And so there's many different themes that you can choose from to have them look and appear different. One thing that I also appreciate is that you don't need to worry about figure placement. If some of you have spent hours trying to modify where your Word document figure is placed in your Word document, this can get you from those being particular about that. Okay. Yes, but the main reason is that we have our code and write-up of the code in one document, and that it can be slideshows, PDF, HTML, Word, Markdown. So there's a simple workflow. So I'm first going to introduce this, and then we will start getting to the nitty-gritty ourselves and creating these things ourselves. So stay with me for a little bit longer. So to make a dynamic document, we will first open a .rmd file. So .rmd stands for R Markdown. If it's just a .md file, then it will be a Markdown file. And we will create a YAML header. We'll talk more about this in a moment. And then we will write the content of whatever we want. Maybe write our abstract, our introduction. We could then embed some code to maybe produce some results or do some data exploration, and then we could create the document. So creating the document is called rendering the document, where the R code is then combined with the writing. And so to do that, kind of what happens in the background, just to kind of clue everyone in, is we create a .rmd report that includes both R code and Markdown narrative. And then we take that file and we give it to Knitter. And Knitter is a package within R that allows the integration of code into these documents with Markdown. And so Knitter is absolutely key to producing these documents. And then Knitter outputs a Markdown, and then that can be given to Pandoc, which is a document converter. And so then Pandoc will then output our HTML, Word, PDF, and whatnot. And so that's kind of what happens in the background. And so it's nice to be familiar with that process, to know what's going on. And while this may seem like there's lots of steps, really what we do is we just click this knit HTML button. And so this is a screenshot of RStudio, and there's this cute little knitting ball, and so we can just click that. Or if we wanted to be all programmy, we could then say within the R console, R Markdown, and so that is telling R to use a function within the R Markdown package. So that's what the semicolon is, and then render, say, the lesson plan into an HTML document. For me and my workflow, and what we will do today is we're going to be hitting this knit HTML function at the button at the top of RStudio. Okay, so let's open up RStudio and create a .rmd file. So let's start working with R Markdown. So to do this, we will navigate over to RStudio. And we will click up here in the top left corner. There is a plus sign. And then we will click R Markdown document. And then this screen pops up. And so this has been in the old RStudio, but there's a few extra things that make the job a little bit easier for us. So we can make a title. So we might say notes from our Markdown workshop. This is my name. This is where we could just click whichever type of document we wanted. We could go to presentations and say which type of presentation slide. We can make a shiny app, which is an interactive application that you can create within R. I have not done that before, so we will not be doing that today. And yes, so under document, you can make your title and then click HTML and click OK. And then it will bring up the document. So here I have, it's already done the job for us, creating this type of header. Okay, so stickies down, and once you are here with your .rmd file, put your green sticky back up on your computer. Okay, Michigan is good to go. Are you guys following along in Davis or Vancouver? Toronto?
David is good to go.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so at the top of our document, it produced this YAML header. And so YAML stands for YAML Ain't Markup Language. And it's basically a nested list structure that includes metadata about the document. And so here, I have in the lesson an example, but it also matches the output that we just created. So here I have the title that I gave it. Please note when you title it that it does not save the file. So here it's still untitled 1. So be careful about that. And then it said the author is Marian Schmidt, and then today, the date. It always defaults to the day that you create this document. So if you're making a document for the future, you will have to change that. Okay. And so here, we could change this to a PDF document if we wanted. And up here, there's a gear symbol. And if you click on that, you can go to Output Options. And here there's the output format. And so you could pick HTML, Word, and you'll notice that it brings up lots of different options about general, figures, advanced, and we'll be coming back to this a bit later. But if you ever want to change your output, you can do that up here. But what it essentially does is just change this here. So we'll be doing the HTML document. Okay. And if you wanted to make the different types of presentations or Word documents, you could also just hand type in any of these options here. If you want to make presentation slides, there's a slightly different syntax to do so. So you can say like this is slide 1, this is slide 2, and so on. But I have noticed in my own work that if you work with HTML, PDF, and Word is that it's pretty compatible, so you don't really need to change any of the syntax. And so that is really nice. Okay, so now we're going to start introducing ourselves to Markdown Basics. So there's a lot of awesome cheat sheets that the R Studio people have released. For example, this image that I have embedded into the lesson came from this R Markdown cheat sheet. And so as you can see, it's extremely detailed, but this can be a nice reference for all of you moving forward. And so just to note that that is there. So on the left side of this panel, we see that there's the plain text. And then on the right side over here, we see the rendered output from Markdown. So for example, if we wanted to make something bold or italics, we could put a single asterisk or a double asterisk around it. If we wanted to do a strike through, for example, we would just surround the words that we wanted to be striked through with 2 tildes on both sides, so kind of hugging it with 2 tildes. You can also see that you can create blocked quotes by doing the caret right here. Different header sizes, for example. You can embed links and images, and you can create listed structures. You can create nice little tables. More on tables later. Footnotes, for example. So there's a lot of flexibility with the syntax of our document. And I have a list of some helpful hints right here. So one thing that you cannot see in that image is that each line ends with 2 spaces. So this is a common issue that I have. So 2 spaces and then enter will create the next line. So if your output looks a little wonky, 2 spaces are often an issue that I've come across, and you may come across as well. If you would like things to look like code, so here I have the superscript. So this has a gray background, and it's kind of a different font. And this is created by hugging the word superscript with this backtick right here. And for example, if we wanted to make something superscript here, like that, we would also hug it with these caret symbol, up arrows right there. So yeah, we could also make equations. So for example, we could say that E equals MC squared here. And we would use $1 sign if we would like the equation to be in line. So here, when I wrote for example, you would do $sign equals MC squared and then $sign. But if you want it to be like a blocked equation, you would put $2 signs, so like this. And there's a difference between the superscript for equations than if you just want to do like an R squared value. And that is that when you're just doing reporting something in superscript within Markdown, where it's not hugged by $signs, you always have to use the up arrow on both sides of whatever you're superscripting. So for example, here, this output, you say begin the superscript at this S and then end it after this T right here. But for equations, every thing that you want to go up, you have to put an up arrow before it. Okay, so let's actually, I have some extra equation-y things here. This can be for your reference, but let's start making some of these things. So, for example, we can try to, I have a challenge question here, but before we do that, let's start typing in our Markdown document that we created. Okay, so for now, since I'm going to be introducing all of this, I'm going to just get rid of all of the stuff that is automatically placed within our .rmd document. So that can help keep things cleaner. So, to bold, as I mentioned before, we can put 2 asterisks. You could also put 2 underscores aside it. This should produce the same type of output. Okay, so I have some Markdown written in my R Markdown document. And so now I want to see what the output is going to look like. So we can do our first knit. So we can click the knit button right here. Oops, first we have to save our file. So this is really nice because if you're working on a file and then you keep knitting your document, it saves it every time you create your document. So that I have found is really helpful, especially if your computer crashes often. But version control, so this doesn't happen. You don't have traumatic experience. So I'm just going to call this notes, and this is going to go into the GitHub repo that the lesson is in. For me and for you, it can go wherever you want. You can put it on your desktop, for example. Okay, and so since I hit knit, we see the output over here. So do you guys, did the viewer just pop up on your computer? Yes, okay, it popped up as a separate window. For those of you who it didn't pop up for, maybe it can, if you go to your environment panel, you may see environment, history, Git, presentation, and viewer. Oh, there's probably no, whoop, I had your presentation open still. Okay, here's the viewer. So, pink stickies if anyone had issues with rendering their document. Awesome. Okay, so here we can see that both the second hello and the third hello are bold. If we wanted to, for example, make it italics, we could say hello this way. And then now we see hello is that way. Okay. So I would like for each classroom to take about 15 minutes. And in the lesson, I have 13 challenge questions. And so I would like for you to all work with the partner next to you and try to produce the same output that I have here on the screen. So you can use the cheat sheet that I linked to earlier and some of the lesson that I have here as well. And yeah, maybe we can check in at 1:20 Eastern. And so the remote classrooms, you guys can ping me if you're finished earlier. Are there any messages, Akima?
Yeah, I have a question. How do you make comments in R Markdown? Try to remember it, because it's not the hashtag, like the normal R.
You would use HTML comments, which
Do you want to do it here?
Rather than trying to.
So the
I know how to silence it with block code, but how do you silence? Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So the question is how do you comment when you're in R Markdown? And you use the HTML comment. And so this here, the caret with the exclamation dash dash is the start of the comment. And then here is the close of the comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And so stickies down, and then when you're finished with the exercises, green stickies back up. And pink stickies if you'd like some help. But it's working and it's outputting external. Yeah. Yeah.
Adding links within the
Yeah, should I do that one? And then I'll be sure that's this is actually so where you have progression here, you'll have to put your West. Yeah. There you go. So just put it there. It's just the Oh, you have 4. Yeah, there you go. Oh, for me. Oh, will you? But I wonder because of the way she presented it, if she wants to see that. Oh, still that's. Well, I just want to make sure I don't want. Yeah. Okay. Whatever. Just all proud of it. Are other people having difficulties with their link? There's space. No. There is no. So. Yeah, oh, yeah. I think that works. Oh, yeah. I just. I have everything numbered. Oh, or both. Yeah. I just like had to do that. Yeah. Yeah. And that was it. Oh, please, fill me in. You still need things. It doesn't work.
Yes, it's just for us to.
Yeah, and then also try inserting, making it a code block. Okay. So I can't do the headers because I have a big number. But that way you can do both the headers and. So actually on the in square bracket, and then that is everything inside of the front. So she's at the previous one.
There's only one needed.
Yes, that's right. Put that in the front. So that, because you're basically running like a. Okay, so that is why, because it, our Markdown. Yeah, and then just change the character to. Alright, there you go. Hopefully I know them.
Yeah. I tried it. That. Oh, but this is for Markdown, and so actually to the Wait, I'm trying to remember. Oh, okay. Okay, and then also this is this. Oh, maybe it's line. Oh, because you're in, so if you're space enter. Yeah, you use it to space. So that's short. Oh, okay. So sometimes you have to enter that space for it to read it. So now it's reading it as a little more.
Yeah.
Oh, then that. Then you start a space. You don't. But you'll need to enter one more line. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there. Enter. Yes. There you go. Okay. Yeah. Wait. Thanks. There we go. Yeah. Okay, so you put I made my So what number are people on?
No.
Oh, that's a block. Oh, this is one, yes.
Doesn't like Markdown.
But since I have readable, no, it's like if they go to the app box. So you must have had this two spaces in. Okay, so there's a.
Oh. I was looking at that.
Yeah, it can be smart. So by default, YAML headers that we don't type, but defaulted is smart graphic. And so it might recognize, oh, you're making an order set. But that's a block, so it's one.
For Ace and
Yeah, so that is making the headers that you could do it two ways. You could have it just or you could actually not have. Oh, no, well, it's sorry,
does it code
it's
blocks?
the code block.
So that would be like,
So if you run it, you should go in like that.
okay.
But if you add, right, before that line and after that line, then it's going to fit add.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And try, like the style of it is that you actually have them on their own. So you have one line where you have the two and
Okay.
so enter there, and then insert there. And so now our Markdown automatically sees that, oh, you're making a code.
Okay.
And this is just to read it as code
And so, then for, is that like a second or is that a different?
Yeah, so I have stuff up here.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So there's the difference between
Okay, so that's here.
So that is if maybe the script is.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I have a link coming up somewhere. I put it in there. Maybe it's like above and I just put like up. I've heard of that. Oh, because of the for example, this is Hello,
I did.
remote classrooms. How are you guys doing? Can you give me an update?
Oops.
We're still working here in Davis.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about up in Canada?
We're still working over here too.
Okay. Do you want to check in a few more minutes?
Yeah, let's give it maybe 5 more minutes, and then we can go over whatever people don't have by then.
Awesome. Let's do that.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Oh, wait, which backslash do you have? Oh yeah, I always get backslash. Slash mixed up. Have you? Huh. If I can. Yeah. Do you have the numbers of my Markdown? I have our
So on the example,
that shouldn't. Yeah, because it's reading it as, like, if you look at your number, it's reading it, yeah. So it's reading it as number 9.
same question.
It's like R Markdown, LAT.
And then, do you get a color?
Oh, okay.
It's not reading it as caption. It's formatting and everything correct. Okay, so what's going on? What did you attacking there?
It might have been after the.
Okay, so the first this is actually for the caption of this line right there. It's for the caption of the article. Yeah, so yeah, there you go, and then enter. Yeah, so sometimes there needs to be a line in between first, so kind of correct. So try to you have to do this. Yes, right, okay. I just do this one must be. So just the first one would be, yeah, so that would be. Yeah, so I always do everything right. Oh, so now it's reading as a block. Yeah, block code, a code block. Okay, so there you go. So you're good. Oh, so it's not. Yeah. Oh, there you go. Oh, so here you have both the asterisk. Yeah, I not continue. Ah. Maybe it's really not. Yeah. Maybe it's yeah, there you go. That's there you go. Yeah, that's what it is. Oh, no, it's not. I have that in just as nice. Yeah. Yes, the Dell computer. The password, if it logged out, the password stuff is there.
Okay.
Hopefully it didn't die.
I think it went to sleep. Should I just press this once?
Sure. Yeah, I only opened it and signed in, and then
Okay.
that's all I.
This isn't doing anything important. This
No,
computer.
it's
Okay.
not. It's this one.
So one.
Okay. Okay, so now it's not reading your list. And then it'll probably be it should be able to read it from now. Because I think it was just the fact that the first two were. Oh, okay, then yeah. Sometimes it's smart and it knows that, oh, you're reading this. But like you did that with how's it going up there? Right, but if you put, how about you, Brian? Are you doing that? Then it's probably. Yeah, so then I put an asterisk before it and then let you know. We're almost there. We're almost there.
That would take a minute. It's like so much. So
It is, right?
I can figure it out. So now we gotta figure out how to make something complicated. It's not.
Oh my God. Okay. Oh, see, I'm always like this.
So now, for the tabs we're working.
Okay. Okay, now it's reading the first one, and then so if we go back, space, enter, and then two tabs, and think so, yeah. There we go. Yeah, so whenever that's happening, I always just like delete all the spaces and then go space space enter, and then if I'm indenting it one more further, I'll do it.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a little buggy at first, but then you get used to it. The space and then it just goes away. Yay, looks like you're good to go. How are things going right now? Okay. Yeah. That is, so one thing is that you're not specifying that you're making a note. So you still need to have like line and asterisk. Hey, I'm making a order. So you'll have to.
Yeah, that's a huge, that's a big word.
Yeah, let's just try that with a simple thing, and then that should really go through the first one. Okay. And so now it's just reading that this is the same yeah, so usually when that's happening, I just delete everything back to the space enter there. And then if you want to indent it further, you'll use the two tabs. And then your simple line further. Or that indentation. Oh, just a dash and an asterisk. Yeah. Yeah, when in doubt, you kind of have to go back. What's in between my lines? Is there anything in between my lines? So I discovered how to get it in the viewer. Yeah, I can help you. Okay, so you would sit the little drop down. It was in the knit button, right?
It's in the knit button, it's like a little.
Oh, the here, okay, the one further over. Okay. Viewer pane. Yeah. Thank you guys. Okay, 139. How's it going, Master? No. Dang. Okay.
Oh, sorry, no.
Hey, remote classrooms, how's it going?
Pretty good. I think some of us are done, some of us are still working. If you want to go through the questions and how you answered all of them, though, I think we'd be ready for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yep. So everyone here in Michigan, good with moving on? Good, I'm getting green stickies and thumbs up. Okay. So, I have posted the solutions that I have in the GitHub page. So if you're currently at the challenge question in the lesson, to get there, we can go to welcome #1. And you can go here, the GitHub repository for this website can be found here. So if you click this link, it should take you to an external tab. And here there's lots of files, but if you can find the file that says challenge answers.rmd. And then you can click raw here. I will zoom in. Okay. So I will not go over all of these, but I will go over some of the key ones that there were lots of questions here at Michigan. And so if I missed anything that were confusing in the remote locations, just chime in and let me know. So, for example, for number 3, we had DOS, and then to make it superscript, we hug it with the up arrows, and then we can knit. But before I do, some of you, the output of your knitting might have popped up in an external page. And so if that happened, you can either say preview in a window, and that will pop up externally, or as I have it, you can preview in the viewer pane. So if you had questions regarding that. And so here I have the superscript exclamations. And I also want to note that since here on line 13 I have this is a comment, so since this is a comment within the R Markdown document, it will not be included in the rendered output. So please note that, unlike the hashtag that I had previously. Because here, if I wanted to use the hashtag like we were coding in a .r file, like here, typing I am coding, instead of showing up as a comment, it's going to be a header. So even if I try to correct it with multiple pound symbols, it will just be reading it as the different headers, like we did in question. Whoop. So question number 8. Okay. Another issue that popped up here in the Michigan location was number 7 about the RStudio link. So we learned a few things about how links work. So some of you might have looked up here to see how the link works. And so you would have seen that we have this square bracket link, square bracket, parentheses, with the URL for the external link. So just to specify, the square brackets here are going to be what is going to be in place of that link. So you could say something like click here and then do, oops, and then type in the link and then knit it. And so here we can see instead of actually writing the URL, it types click here. And then hopefully that will go to the website. Awesome. And so if we didn't include this, it doesn't include the link. So we need to have something there. So if you want to show the actual website itself, you have to put that into the square brackets itself to have it pop up into the rendered HTML file. Another fun new update to RStudio is here in this viewer pane. We can see that there's a few buttons up here. One button that I've liked, so if you put your cursor over it, it will tell you what the button does. So we can remove it from the viewer pane. We can clear all the viewer items, so past viewer objects that we had, or something that will, this button will show it in a new window. So if I click on this button, it shows me what it looks like as if I was opening it up into my browser. And so that can be helpful to see what it actually looks like in a web browser. Okay. And so another thing that people noticed was here when we did the code block, it might have not been reading to go to the next line since there was a block. So I will just say 1, 2, list, and then 3. I will have 3 be blocked. And so here it's turning green because it's telling me I'm reading that this is going to be a blocked quote. And so we can knit it. And so it's actually just literally reading the code. It knows that it's on the next line because I did my 2 single spaces and enter. But sometimes there needs to be an extra line in between for it to really be able to recognize, hey, this caret means I'm making a block quote. So we could just add 1 extra line there and then knit it. And now it's reading it. And so at least here in the Michigan classroom, there were several people who, when they were making their ordered list at the end for their cookies recipe, that this was often an issue. And so if it's really hard to troubleshoot, what I often will do is I will just delete all of the spaces from my previous listed item and then just add my 2 spaces, enter, and then just to be sure, an extra line. And so that can help debug some of the issues. Okay. Does that cover everything for us at Michigan? Yes. Okay. How about the remote classrooms? Does that help fill in some of the blanks? Maybe. Did I lose you guys?
No, we're good. Could you go over 13, please?
I didn't understand.
Could you go over number 13, please?
Go over number 13?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, of course. Okay. So I can remember what the letters are. I'm just going to copy this into my RStudio here. Okay, so we have our chocolate chip cookie recipe here. And so here I might remove it from number 3. So I will just bold it here, and then I'll add my 2 spaces, and then my enter. And then I'm going to just delete the extra space there so I can start my ordered list. So then we can do 1, we first add butter, and then our 2 spaces, enter, and then 2. And then this is where we're now going to try to say, okay, we no longer want to have an ordered list. So instead of using numbers, we're going to use the typical bullet points. So first, we will do our 2 spaces and enter. And then I'm just going to delete the extra room there. We could just typically, like with any other programming language, there's a style to Markdown. And so I typically always use this dash here for my bullets. You can use an asterisk, you can use a plus sign. It's pretty flexible, but to keep with your own style, just adopt one of them, and then moving forward, just always use that. It's good to be consistent. Okay, so here I can double check that I have 1 space, oops, 2 space, enter, and then my bullet item. So I'm just going to render this to see how I'm doing. Okay, so I have my chocolate chip cookie recipe in bold, and then I have the butter and sugar listed as 1 and 2, and I have the bullet point beginning. But then it's not identifying that I have any new lines for the rest of my code. So let me check. Okay, so we're going to try to add this indented one more for the next line. Oh, and also I've noticed that I have the full black bullet instead of like the white bullet. So I could tab 2 times right here to try to say we're indenting it a little bit further to the right. And so now I have this white bullet instead of the filled in bullet, and it's one further over. And then I will just, so we want our extra, our second unordered list item to be at mix. So I just delete all the spaces there, just to be sure, and then I can do my 2 spaces, enter. And now it's automatically recognizing that I'm already indented 1 over. So since I want to indent one more time, I'm going to add my 2 spaces. And here's my dash symbol. And then that should now bring the next line 1 more over, 1 indent over. Okay. So then we may want, we will add our 2 spaces, enter, and then now we can just delete those automatic indents and return back to our listed structure. So then we can start typing 3 eggs, space, space, enter, 4, and so on. So this should start recognizing the list. Okay, does anyone have any questions about number 13? Yeah, we have a question at Michigan.
Can you customize what the icons are for the farther indented lists, or is that just a stock options?
Okay, so the question is about the customizing the bullets. And I actually do not know the answer to this. Does anyone?
So if you turn your document into a PDF document, you would see it formatted differently, even though you didn't change anything about the Markdown. So the output, the formatting of the output is disconnected from your content. There are advanced ways to change the style sheets that are associated with the HTML if you want to. Some people may have noticed that in the example that Marion provided, the block quotes were formatted a little different into gray bars and blue bars. So these things, I think that just changed between versions. The power of Markdown is that you can just write it one way and then serialize it or render it to a variety of ways. But yeah, I don't think we're going to get into the style sheets. I think there is a way to do that for your HTML output, and then if you're using Pandoc for PDFs or anything else as well, but that's much more advanced. It's not within the Markdown that you're writing up.
Yeah. So you can customize it. It sounds like, but it's more advanced to get that style. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so it's actually almost 2 o'clock, so we've already been going for almost 2 hours. So maybe we should take a quick 10-minute or 15-minute break. What do the remote classrooms think?
Yeah, we're good to keep going, or if you want to take a break, that's fine.
Okay.
I think a break would be good. Yeah.
Okay.
For
So
us.
let's take a 10-minute break, and we can come back around 2:05 Eastern time.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. Happy break.
Awesome.
Hello. Hey, are the remote classrooms ready to start again?
Yes, we are fed and we are happy and we are ready to go.
Awesome.
I just need to wrangle some people and we'll be good to go in about 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay. Is Michigan ready to go?
Ready.
Awesome. Okay, so just to, while we are waiting on another classroom, so I put together this really long lesson and had no idea how far we would make it. So we will not be able to make it through the entire lesson, but this is a resource that I put together for all of you. So for example, there was a question about bibliography and citations. So I will hopefully get to it for a few minutes at the end, but if we don't, here we are on the table of contents to the left of the lesson plan. You can come down here and click on bibliography. And just a few notes about it is there's 2 files that are necessary. And that is here. So to create a bibliography, you need 2 files. So you need one file that is a bibliography file, and that's just the information about each one of your references. And so if you have Mendeley or Zotero, or you use EndNote, you can generate a file like that. It could be, say, a bibtext file or a bibliotex file, something of that sort. The second file is something that we can just go grab off of the interwebs, and it is a citation style language file. And that's basically saying this is how you format these citations. And what's really nice about that is that Zotero has a, I have it down here, they have a style repository. And so, for example, in our YAML header, here I have an example. So here this would output in HTML. And then I have my first file is bibliography, and then bibliography.bib. So this would be, say, for example, your bibtext file that you exported from your Mendeley library. And then the CSL, the citation style language, could be pulled from Zotero's style repository. So I'll just click on this. And so say you're writing a scientific paper in R Markdown and you think that it could be published in Nature. You could search for Nature, and then if you click here and put your cursor over it, it shows you what it looks like. And then if you click this button, it will just download to your computer. So that is briefly how to do citations and bibliographies. I have extra notes of like how you would do this here. So these are some examples. And so, for example, I could have my entire Mendeley library in a .bib file. And then R Markdown will know which ones to include by having the square bracket @ symbol, and then there's going to be a unique key for each one of the things in your .bib file. And so you would just use the square bracket @ symbol and then that key. So here I'm using @Falkowski 2008 because I think this is a really sweet paper, especially if you are privy of microbes. And so that produced this for me here. And then at the very end of your document, you will have to add references. So you'll do this by just adding the header, so the £1 symbol and references, which is what I did down here. And then it just automatically reads all of the square bracket @ symbol with the key, and then just puts it automatically into your document. So that was brief, but for those of you who are wondering how to do that, you can follow the lesson down here in section number 9. Okay, is the other classroom ready?
Yeah, we're all set.
You're all set. Okay. So we were back finishing up Markdown Basics. So if everyone clicks on section 5.6, embed code, we're now going to talk about embedding code. So we know how to bring in images. We know how to bring in external links. We know how to bold things, italicize them, and make lists. But what we really care about is adding code to our documents. And as I mentioned before, there are 2 ways to do this. One is through the inline code, and then the other is through code chunks. And so inline code is created by using a singular backtick, and then you follow the first singular backtick with the letter R. This will differentiate it from looking code-like. So here's some code that is output. I could have just created that by making surrounding 0.0045 with backticks. But the letter R is what tells R Markdown to run our code. So, for example, here I have done 2 to the 11th is 2048. So let's try to run that in our Markdown file. So I am curious, what is 2 to the 11th? It is. So now I'm going to open up my inline code. So 1 backtick, the letter R. I'm going to just add a few spaces and add my final backtick. When we add the second backtick, it turns yellow. And so it's automatically recognizing, hey, we're typing inline code. So then after the space, we add a space after R, and then we might want to run to the 11th. So now we're running our code. And so we don't need the double up arrows. If I really wanted to check, I could run in my console. Okay, so it is 1 singular up arrow. So let's knit that. Great. Okay. Are there any questions? Cool. So for example, we could actually make it a little more complicated. So before we were looking at the empty cars data set. Oops, it's small. And so, for example, if we wanted to see the average miles per gallon, we could do that. We could say the average miles per gallon in empty cars. So here that's just going to read it as blocked code. So it's just formatting as if it was code. Is. So now I'm going to open up inline code. So the difference is this letter R. And so we could say mean empty cars, $MPG. Close parentheses. So we could say test our code down here in the console, make sure it works, and then if it does, we can then render our document. And so now we can see at the bottom of the page that the average miles per gallon in empty cars is about 20 miles an hour. I mean, miles per gallon. Are there questions? Great. Okay, so the key there is this letter R. So you may find this, I find this really useful. So this, imagine that you're writing your paper and you're running lots of statistics and you need to get that p-value or that r-squared value or some other thing that you calculated in your document. So this could be a great place where instead of typing the actual p-values, like say 0.0045, you could just go to that variable that you specified and call it in. So to reiterate that, we could take the mean empty cars. Oh, no, it's in a code time. Okay, wait. Let's not go that route because we need to talk about code chunks first. Okay, so let's introduce code chunks. So a code chunk is where we're going to be running multiple lines of code, and we need to actually take a part of the document. Oh, zoom in. Okay. Thank you. Woo. Okay. Okay, so now we might want to run a few lines of code all together rather than having it within a paragraph or other narrative. So the idea behind this is that we type 3 backticks, curly brace, the letter R. So this is different from the code blocks that we came across when we were doing our Markdown. And then we will close it with 3 more backticks. So it will look something like this. And the new RStudio has this nice button, which is this green square with the C in it and the green plus sign. And so wherever you are in your document, you can just click that, and it will automatically add those 3 backticks with the letter R in curly braces and then close it. And so as we can see, it kind of tells us what style we should use. So creating the code chunk is on one line, and then closing it is on another line all by itself. So maybe we could add this above where we were. So we could calculate the mean miles per gallon in the empty cars data set and save it to a variable. So we could save like mean MPG. This also brings the idea of style into it, so it's good to have informative variables. So here, hopefully this will help trigger that this value or variable mean underscore MPG is going to be the mean miles per gallon from the empty cars data set. And then if we wanted to actually have it output, just like in a typical .r or R code file, we might want to have it read to the screen. And so we can think of this code chunk as literally being us working within the console. So knitter, which is the package that's reading these code chunks and processing these code chunks, is going to read through the document from top to bottom and output the code chunks as if it were processing it through the R console. So that's really nice because if you're already an R user, it's kind of your workflow already. We're familiar with that process. So then we might want to insert this into our inline code instead of calculating it. So here I'm going to be calling the variable that I have defined within this code chunk. And another important thing to keep in mind is that we might be inserting lots of code chunks throughout our analysis. So we it's a really good practice to name each one of our code chunks. So here, we might have mean MPG as our code chunk or of empty cars. So often when I'm naming our code chunks, I will use dashes or underscores. But as with other style things, it's good to just pick your method and stay consistent. Okay, so I'm going to knit this and see what happens. Okay, so here I have the output of it, and it's showing me the code, and it's also telling me the output of the code. So this is this double hashtag right here is the output, and this is what would show up, say, in our console. Instead of, so it just adds those two hashtags to the left. And then in addition, I now have the 20 miles per gallon average, and instead of actually calculating it, I'm just calling this variable. So this could be a coefficient from a multiple linear regression, or anything that you've determined that's important for your analysis. Okay. Okay, so since Knitter is processing these chunks, it's good to take a second to first appreciate that it's doing all of this for us, but also what it's doing. So it's identifying the code, it evaluates the code, and then it's rendering it. And like I said, it's being processed like in the R console. And so two things that I've been, that are really good practice is to, again, name your R code chunk. And then also to set global chunk options. So we'll come back to that in a minute. And one reason to help motivate you to name your R code chunks is because this is a way of navigating throughout your document. So for example, I have a screenshot right here. And this is when I was putting together this lesson. And you can see here it says chunk labels. So you may see this in your R Studio. So here in the current one, we can see the headers. And then also it's saying chunk number 1, and it has the chunk name that I just gave it. So if you're working with a huge file, say you're writing a dissertation or even a paper that you're putting together for publication, this could be a way of navigating throughout thousands or hundreds of lines of code. And I find that to be really useful. So that's another reason why you should name your chunks. And often there will be external files created. So if you're caching some code chunks, so saying don't run it because this one takes a long time, actually just pull in the files from a previous run, it will use your code chunk names. So some things to take into mind. Okay, so chunk options are really useful. So you may want to create a document where you don't have any code in it, but you have all of the results of the code. So maybe you're collaborating with somebody who doesn't program in R, and so they don't care about the code. They just want to see the pretty plot that you created. And so you could specify echo, so echo here equals false. And so within each code chunk, you can say what to do. So, and there's several options. So you could say evaluate the code, so then eval would equal true. Or if you didn't want to evaluate, you would say eval equals false. There might be some messages that pop up, and you may or may not want to include that in your final document. And then the results of the code chunk, it's defaulted to have a markup output, but there's another type of output called as is, or hold or hide. And so those are other options that you may be interested in exploring. So to continue with this example of calculating the mean and this current output, so maybe I only want to show the output of it. So I have the letter R, space, and then my code label, my chunk label, and then you separate with a comma. And then already we can see that RStudio is telling me all of these options. So you could familiarize yourself with any of these. I'm going to introduce you guys to the ones that I use a lot. And so here, we would like to say echo equals false if we do not want it to echo the code in our document. Okay, so this is an example of a knitter argument that we can put within our chunk. And I will knit that. And now we can see that the code is now missing from the rendered document. Alternatively, we may like to say eval equals false. And then we would expect that there would be no code output, but also no results, because we're saying it, don't evaluate the code. So knitter, ignore this code chunk, because eval equals false. Oh, great.
Marion, you're referencing it later in the document.
Sorry?
You're referencing the variables later in your document.
Ah, yes. So, perfect. So, as someone here in Michigan noticed, I'm referencing this inline code. So here, since I'm not evaluating this code chunk anymore, I received an error. So knitter is smart, and it's saying this object right here, mean and underscore MPG, which I'm using after my code chunk, no longer exists because we're not evaluating the code. So this is nice because often if you're human like I am, you make mistakes. So then here I might actually replace it with the actual code that it was originally to get around that. And then here it's as if the code chunk is not there. Okay. So I have a challenge question, but since it's 2:30, do people want to explore some knitter options in their code chunks? Yes? Yes. We're nodding here in Michigan. How about you guys in the remote locations?
Yeah, I think we would rather go through the knitter stuff.
Yeah, okay. So I have a challenge question here then, so let's go ahead and do that. So run the code chunk below and play with the following knitter code chunk options. So you can play with eval, echo, oh, here's a new one that I didn't mention, collapse equals true or false. There's a tidbit on that just above here, so you can read through that yourself. And then results equals as is or markup and hide. Ooh, my quote got messed up. And then be sure to name your code chunks and write up some of the results that you see in Markdown, so what we were covering before the break, to explain what you find. So this will be the code chunk, and then I'm just going to hide later. So let's check in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Okay, let's, so 2:36 Eastern. And then pink stickies if you guys need help. So here under HTML pages, it talks a little bit, and it has the external links for all the different plugins. So yeah,
That's cool.
good luck and thanks for joining.
Thank you.
That's good. Yeah.
Oh, you're not going to change it. So it's saying like your stuff like so I'm typing in this second one. Yeah, let me actually do, yeah, so that's not so yeah, so this is actually sometimes, so if you do like try it and time it. Oh my gosh. Yeah, because at first it was like,
Okay. Okay, remote classrooms, are you guys there?
Yep, we're here. We're good.
Awesome. Okay. So, Davis, can you guys tell me what you learned? Say either about collapse or results, or what was something cool that you learned?
for the graph I was using, I had to set message to false to get it to stop being any output besides the graph.
Okay, so someone had to set message to false when she was making a graph to stop getting extra output.
Awesome. Yeah, so not having some of the messages that the R console would originally output, so to ignore that and not include it in the rendered document. How about up in Canada? What did you guys learn?
Does anyone have anything they want to say? Learned?
We learned collapse is really nice looking.
Yeah.
Great. Did you hear that?
So you learned something about collapse?
Yeah, they really like how collapse looks tidy.
Awesome. Yeah, so if you're running really short pieces of R code, collapse can be really helpful. And I have some of those examples outputted here where this would not be collapsed right here. So it's running some short R code and shows the results. And then, up here we can see that it is collapsed, and then it has it all within one chunk. So that can be really helpful. So setting global options is something that can be really helpful. So people might have noticed that when you created your .rmd file that it automatically creates a chunk at the beginning where it sets some code. And so this is a way to get around with each and every code chunk that you're adding. You can just specify it all at the very beginning of the document, so you don't need to keep typing eval equals false or eval equals true for each one of the code chunks. So then if you had a code chunk that was different from your global chunk options, you could then just specify it for that singular code chunk. So for example, you could add this in at the top of your document. Global options. And then here, this is telling knitter, my chunk options, I'm setting them. And so, for example, echo will always equal false, or maybe I would like it to equal true, and so on. And here we'll quick talk about these figure options in the next section. So here, if you're making some figures, as scientists love to do, there's a bunch of things that we can set specifically for the output or the rendering of figures. So for example, we could use this chunk option as fig width and fig equals height, fig.height, and we could set it to say 3 or 5 or 7, and that will change the size of the image in the rendered file. We could align it to be, say, in the center of the document, on the left or on the right. And then, for example, if we're creating files, so sometimes if we have a chunk create a lot of figures, it might automatically want to save those figures. And so we can specify a path of, hey, save the figures from this chunk in this path. So for example, the default here would be in a folder within your working directory called figure. And so then everything would go into a directory called figure, and then the images would be there named by chunk. So it might be chunk, the name of your chunk, so dash like plot1, for example. And so you can explore some figure knitter chunk options. And I just have some examples here in the lesson. So using the miles per gallon, the frequency within the MT cars data. This is it aligned here in the center. Alternatively, we could align it, the plot to the right or to the left. We could modify fig.width and fig.height. and make it a smaller image or a bigger image. So you can see some of the output. We might want to run a for loop and create a bunch of figures in an output. So here I'm using the multiplot function from the R cookbook with the link there. And so this might be a nice way to, say, run a for loop for some of your variables of a study that you're working on, and then have it output into one singular document, and then you can go back and read through the document. So it's these dynamic documents can be really great for data exploration. Run all these for loops and produce all of these plots, and then I'll come back and check in with the results later. Okay. And then tables. So tables can be really helpful. For example, you may be running linear models and you want to output the coefficients and p-values from the linear model, or there may be times that you want to report lots of variables in a table. And so Carl Broman, with his Knitter in a Nutshell, has created a fantastic resource. And he has, so if you click on this link right here, that will take you over to his tutorial. And so you can play around with that. I have some options here, or some examples here. And so he talks about table and pander tables, which are really nice. He also mentions xtable. I've left them out of the lesson here, but you can click the link for more on that. And so Cable is a table creator within the Knitter package. So if you've already downloaded the Knitter package, then you can create a table. So for example, we could take this code, and here I have it output, so n equals 4, so it's just going to show me the top 4 rows. And so if we wanted to make it here, after our global options, we may want to add another to our file where we load packages, so loading libraries. And so we could library Knitter. So that's if you've already installed it. And then we could name our chunk like load packages. And then it will have our default, so it will echo and it will evaluate it, and it won't show us our messages and warnings. And then we could create our new chunk where we have our cable. So now this is going to be pulling from the cable function within Knitter. And so if we wanted to read about the cable function, we could look at our help page here in our Markdown, in our studio, or we could just empty cars, knit our file. And so here it's showing us our global chunk options and then outputting the cable table. Another option for data tables, if you really like interactive options, is we could library the DT package. So you would have had to install that package as well, which was in the installation instructions. And then we could look at that table here. So this is just a little bit below the pander table in the lesson. So we have a data table. And so then I'll just paste, so we have the data table function. So if we library the DT package, then we can ask questions. We see that it's within this DT package. And then here I'm heading empty cars. And now I'm specifying that the number of rows is going to be the entire data frame of empty cars. And then I'm just setting options, list the page length to 5, and we'll see this in the output in a second. Okay, so we have our cable table here where we have our first n equals 4, our first 4 rows. And then now, I'm just going to zoom out briefly so we can see it a little bit better. Now we see our data table options. And so now we can start interacting with it. So we could say show us 10, organize it by miles per gallon. We could search, so maybe we wanted to pick out Corollas. So that's a really nice interactive table. We have a question here in Michigan. Yeah?
Does the search bar come by default? Is there any way to control that?
It does come by default, and I have not played around with it very much to, yeah. Okay, so those are a few options for making tables. Caching. Okay, so there's a question about caching. Okay, yes, so we have about 25 minutes left, so I'll be sure to touch on caching before we leave for the day. Okay, so HTML widgets, just briefly, they were with the more recent R Markdown, and so we have R Markdown version 2 allows the use of widgets really easily, and that can be like a really empowering thing for people who are first making plots. And so if you click on this link here, there's a tutorial. So here, this is the data table tutorial. And then, for example, Plotly is another graphical interactive plots. And so if you want to explore more, you can look at that. Okay. And for example, I have included this. And so this can be something that could be really nice for an advisor or collaborator to be able to interact with plots. Okay. Just to briefly touch on, for those of you who are Python or Ruby programmers or other languages, there's a knitter option, and that is engine. And so you could select within your, at the beginning of your R code chunk, the knitter option engine equals whatever programming language you're going to use. And so that makes it this really flexible. So regarding the appearance, you may want the code to fold, or you may want to have a table of contents. And so here's some explanation on how to do that. So since this is something that I often use in my output, I'd just like to touch on this for a few minutes. So TOC stands for Table of Contents, and so this will be up in your YAML header. So, for example, in this document that we are working on, where we have HTML document, we may want to add a bunch of stuff. And so I could hand type it and say TOC true and whatnot. However, what's really nice with the new R Markdown is that we can, we can click on this gear symbol, and we can go to output options. And so here, this is what we saw at the very beginning. And so we could change from HTML to Word. We could use this clicky box to say, yes, include table of contents. Show me a theme. So let's, I have, I think, readable for my lesson. And so we could do that. We could say that, so syntax highlighting is going to change the color of the code chunks that are when you echo it to the rendered document. So you may want to make it espresso. And then if you click OK, it automatically writes your YAML header for you. And that's a really nice new attribute of the new RStudio. And so then, for example, we could knit, and then now we see our output is a little different. So here, our highlighting is dark, and so this is espresso, and so you could find what type of highlighting floats your boat. You could see now here that my code block, or my block quote, excuse me, so here at this 3 is now blue. So some of you may have noticed when we were doing our Markdown exercise that you had a gray bar to the left of your block quote, and so that has to do with the theme. And so here, theme readable. So you could play around with that. Maybe you prefer Space Lab and Paddock. And so we could knit that and take a look at it. And so it's really nice that it's really flexible to change the appearance of the rendered document. Okay, any questions about the appearance or anything like that? Okay. So on your own time, you could go ahead and do this challenge. Okay, so caching. So a problem with, say, writing a paper within R Markdown is that you could have like a simulation within your data analysis workflow. And that simulation may take days, weeks, hours, minutes, and you just don't have the time to wait for it to render into the final document every time. So a way to get around that is caching. And so if a code chunk hasn't been modified since the last time you rendered the document, you can use the knitter code option of cache equals true. And so the old results will just be loaded in instead of running that simulation again. And this can be really helpful because it will make rendering your document really fast. Or alternatively, say you want to stop halfway through your document and say no longer run the code after a certain line, you can use this argument knit_exit. And it basically tells knitter, I'm done with the rest of the code in my document, ignore it all. And then it will just provide everything above knit_exit in the rendered document. Okay, so just to quick show what that might look like is here we could set our option in one of our code chunks to cache equals true. I'm also going to mention about the files. So I'm working in notes.rmd. You can see that it's red because I haven't saved it. So when I click knit, it's going to turn black. And so that will signify that it's saving it. And so here I have my notes notes.html and my notes.rmd. So when I run cache equals true, it's now going to produce a new directory in which it's going to save any output from this code chunk. Ooh, okay. Okay, so here, I will just change this. Okay, so now I have my notes.html, my notes.rmd, and my notes_cache. So it will just take your document name, underscore, and then cache. And then within that, it will have the code chunk name. So here's head empty cars. So that's the name of my code chunk. So that's reaffirming that our code chunk labels matter. And then it has this alphanumeric, which is a unique ID for the output in, say, the first line and then potentially the second line. And so instead of running it each time I create my document, it's now going to just read in these files. So if I run my document, it should be slightly faster than it was before because I haven't made any changes to this head-empty cars code chunk. However, Knitter is really smart, and it can, now that I told cache equals true, it's going to keep track of this code chunk. And so if I make a single modification to this code chunk, it's going to recognize it. So even if I add a white space, it will say, oh, this code chunk has now been modified, and then the next time I run it, it's going to say render that code chunk, and it could be that hour-long simulation. And so just be careful that if you want to add a space or do some little changes to that code chunk, that Knitter is going to recognize that change and then rerun that chunk. Okay. Do we have questions about caching? Yep.
So if you have data and you're inputting the data into the R or into the chunk, and you don't change the chunk, but the data has changed, I found before that like when you knit it again, it still remembers the old data, and so it doesn't recognize that the data is new. So how do you get around that?
Yes. So that is a really, thank you so much for bringing that up. That is a really important note. And so here I have some issues with caching. And so what you mentioned is here this number 2, so external files that Knitter does not track changes. So say your data file, like you mentioned, that may be updated, but Knitter cannot keep track of those changes. So one thing, I'm just going to mention the 2 other ones. So another issue is that the version of R might also change, and so this is updated every few months, and so that's something that Knitter cannot keep track of. And also, you may have uncached chunks that happen before the chunk that you have cached, and those have changed, but your cached code chunk does not keep track of those previous ones. So one way to get around that issue, so number 3, is to have dependencies saying this chunk relies on previous code chunks. However, for the data changing, I am not sure about that. Does anyone have any insights on that? I'm seeing confused faces here at Michigan. Does anyone remote have an answer?
So like, I'm the one who asked the question. when I
Yeah, do you answer?
no, not really. But like what I do is just delete the cached folder. So in the folder where it's stored the cached data, I just delete that and then I have to rerun it. But it's not good because I might forget that I've changed the data and then forget to delete that cached. So it's not a good answer, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe making a mental note or some other, like maybe you can bold in red, or yeah, I don't have a good solution. But this is something to really keep in mind because we won't be keeping track of that with our, even if we have dependencies on previous code chunks. Yeah, so something for us to keep in mind as researchers using this tool. Thank you for bringing that up, and apologies about no good answer. Okay, so it's 3:04. We have 10 minutes left. Is there anything else that people would like to cover, or any questions regarding anything that we've covered?
Yeah, we have one here.
Yes, the knitter caching brings up the question of integrating some sort of other track changes like Git or GitHub. So I'm wondering, I'm starting to get a bit confused here in terms of good trackability in terms of using Git with knitter. Is there a conflict, or is there some way to get those to work nice that I'm not just seeing at the moment?
So what's the goal?
Let's say that you're typically using Git and GitHub to track all your changes. How does the knitter paradigm relate to that? Can you integrate those, or is that those two separate worlds that can never be merged?
Got it. Okay, so if you could mute your microphone on your side so I can, okay, thank you. Git is going to be keeping track of changes in your document, and caching is keeping track of results processed by knitter code chunks. So they're doing two different things, but you can use them both at the same time. So, for example, you may have your R Markdown document that you have under version control, and you may be creating or deleting knitter code chunks, and Git and GitHub will be keeping track of those changes that you've made to your code chunks and also to your document. Everything within the document, Git will be keeping track of. So that is really nice, because something, if you're working in Word, that's not as easy to use with Git and GitHub, because it's not a text file like we have with our RMD file. But caching, the results from caching a chunk will be held within GitHub. So for example, we could look at the GitHub repo for this lesson, and we can see that there's some cached folders in here. And so those files that are saved by the cache, those will be under version control. And so if you do need to go back to 2 weeks ago when you ran your simulation results, then you can do that through GitHub and Git. So you can go back to a different version, get those old cached results, and then say load them back in and kind of update it more manually. And then you could commit that up and saying merging from previous cached results, for example. There's a hand here in Michigan.
Yeah, just quick clarification question. That's because you added the cache files to your Git repo. That's not done automatically. Right?
Yes, so I have to, as the user of both Git and R Markdown, I have to commit all of the files that I'm producing with R Markdown and knitter to Git and GitHub, using Git up to GitHub. And so if I don't push my cached results up to GitHub, then those results will not be under version control. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Awesome. Yeah, so there's a lot of things kind of happening under the table that we need to keep in mind. So that question helped to keep us aware of that. So thank you for that. Okay, do we have any other questions, remote or locally here in Michigan? Okay, so since it's 3:09, I guess we could let ourselves out of the workshop a few minutes early. You can please be welcome to revisit this lesson. It will be up on RPubs. Oh, okay, that's a perfect thing. Let's not leave early, just kidding. There's a cool thing that you might want to know, and that is how do you publish some things on RPubs? So we have created this cool document from our workshop, and we might want to share it with someone. And maybe we don't want to have to email it to them or have them save a file. We just want them to be able to go to this URL and access it, kind of like we did for our workshop today. So to do that, we can click this symbol. So just to be clear, so this is down in my viewer. This is the rendered document. And so then this symbol right here, I could click, and it says publish to RPubs. And then it's a free service from RStudio for sharing documents on the web. And so you could do this. But everything that you publish here will be publicly available. But for example, if you wanted to, you could go ahead and do it. You'll have to have a login. So I have a login. And then you could save it. So notes, you can make a title, notes from our Markdown workshop on May 11th, and notes from today. Another thing that you can modify is the URL. So I might want to call it notes from R Markdown. And so then this will be the URL that you share with whoever you want to share your document with. And then it's available, and now it's shareable. And so this is a really easy way to share the documents that you produce in R Markdown. However, it will be publicly available. But this is great for submitting homework or other things like that. And if you go to RPubs, you can see all of the community contributed documents. And this is updated live, so we can see, oh, there is my document. And so you could go ahead and do that with your own work. And you can also see some slides that people have produced and so on. So that's kind of finalizing your document and sharing it with the world.
Can you do that with the presentations or just HTML documents?
I believe you can do it with.
You can do it with the presentations and the HTML. I don't know if you could do the PDFs on there.
Yeah, I don't think it's, so if you make the PDF presentations, those won't go on, and neither will PDF documents, but you could post those up on your GitHub page in your repository and have your collaborator navigate to there. If you make HTML5 presentations, so like the IO slides, for example, that is up here. So for example, this person 2 hours ago added developing data products, and this is a HTML5 slide presentation. Yeah. Okay, yep.
Oh, could you change website?
Oh, great question. So if I wanted to change my website, all I would have to do is modify my file. So then we'd go back, and if I wanted to change my highlight to espresso, or add another header, today is great, I could reknit my file, and then now we see that it has the espresso here, and so it's different. And then I just re-click this button, the publish button, and I just say update existing. And then now it's updated. And if we reload our pubs, now it has that updated version. But the link is the same exact link as if I specified it originally. So if your lab was writing a tutorial on this is how we process our data, and this is our workflow, you could publish it, make it available publicly through the RPubs website. And when I host software carpentry workshops, I always make my lessons in R Markdown and then publicly share it on RPubs. So this is something that I've used a lot, especially for hosting workshops like today.
Some people already did publish theirs.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. I like it. Sweet. Yeah. Okay, do any of the remote locations have any final questions or final words? Or did I sell it for you to use it?
Yeah, we have a question here.
Yeah.
One question about RPubs. Is there like any site or place on RPubs that kind of shows like top class example pages to look at? Like it just kind of looks like a list. I'm trying to see if there's like a most popular list to learn from.
I actually don't know. I think it's just updated as they are contributed.
Okay.
At least that's how I've seen it. I don't know if other people have something else to offer. I wanted to share my whole page, like everything I ever created, I would just delete this final page, and you can see the documents that I've contributed. So that's one way to get to a particular user, but you would have to have their user name. Sorry, I learned more on that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So for people here at Michigan, if you could take your pink sticky and write one thing that you wish we would have covered, or one thing that you did not like about today, to give me some feedback. And then on the green sticky, if you could write something that you really enjoyed about today's workshop. Maybe a particular function, or anything that you think of before you leave.
Okay. Broadcast here.